Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another deep dive.
It is so good to be back with you all.
I want to start today by asking you a question, and it's a bit of a personal one, but I think everyone listening, all our Sunnies out there, will understand this immediately.
Okay, I'm ready. Go for it.
Have you ever felt just completely exhausted, like totally drained of all your energy,
Hmm.
but you haven't actually done anything, not anything physically difficult that day?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
That is a very, very specific kind of tired. Like, I haven't run a marathon. I haven't been to the gym.
Right.
I haven't even moved heavy furniture. But I feel like I can barely lift my arms.
Exactly that. It's not a muscle tiredness, is it? It's
Yeah.
a heaviness. Maybe you've just been sitting in a chair for 8 hours staring at a screen.
Yes.
But by 6 o'clock, you feel like you've been carrying actual bricks on your back all day.
It's that I need a nap before I can even think about making dinner feeling. Strained, isn't it?
It is.
Because logically, if you look at the calories you've burned or the physical work you've done, you should be full of energy. We've been sedentary, but we feel completely wiped out.
That paradox is exactly what we're going to unpack today. Why is doing, quote, nothing so incredibly exhausting?
I'm so glad we're talking about this.
We're going to explore the idea of stress, but not in that vague, general way people usually discuss it. We're going to look at a very specific metaphor that I think changes everything.
And this isn't just some pop psychology idea. We're basing this deep dive on one of the most famous frameworks out there from Stephen R. Covey's book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
That's right.
But we're also going to layer in some really solid neuroscience to explain why this metaphor is so powerful and so true.
Exactly. Today, we're going to talk about the weight of the glass.
It's such a classic story.
It really is. But before we tell it, I just want to set the stage for our listeners. If you're feeling that mental heaviness today, or if you feel like your battery is just draining way too fast, this episode is going to feel like a user manual for your own brain.
And I think it's important to say, we aren't just going to tell you to relax. Telling a stressed person to just relax is, well, it's about as helpful as telling a drowning person to just swim.
It never, ever works.
Never. Instead, we're going to look at the mechanics of how we carry our stress so you can actually decide when and how to put it down.
Okay, so let's go into the classroom. This is the core story Stephen Covey uses, and it's been used by psychologists for decades.
Set the scene for us.
Okay. Imagine a professor. She's standing in front of a lecture hall full of students, and she's teaching a class on stress management principles.
Okay.
She picks up a simple glass of water from her desk and holds it up for everyone to see.
Right. And I can just imagine everyone in the room sort of rolling their eyes thinking, oh, here we go. Is the glass half full or half empty?
Exactly. That's the cliche everyone expects. A lesson on optimism. Look on the bright side.
But that's not where she goes with it.
Not at all. She holds the glass out and she asks the class a very simple question. How heavy is this glass of water?
A literal question. A physics question.
Yes. And the students, they start shouting out answers. 8 ounces, 12 ounces, 200 grams.
But I'm trying to calculate the objective weight. The mass of the glass plus the liquid inside.
Right. They're trying to get the correct answer.
Which is a fair attempt. I mean, if you put it on a scale, it has a fixed absolute weight.
True. But the professor just shakes her head and smiles. And she says, from my perspective, the absolute weight of this glass doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
It all depends on how long I hold it.
And that is the shift right there. It's not about the mass, it's about the duration.
Yes. Let's break down the 3 stages she describes, because this is where the biology really starts to kick in. Why don't you walk us through the first stage?
Okay, so stage 1. Imagine I hand you that glass of water. Let's say it weighs 200 grams, about half a pound. And I ask you to hold it at arm's length for just 1 minute, 60 seconds.
Easy. No problem at all. I wouldn't even really notice it.
Right. It feels light. You can still talk. You can look around. You can think about what you're having for lunch.
Yeah.
The burden is, well, it's negligible.
Okay. Now, stage 2.
Stage 2, you keep your arm in that exact same position. Don't bend your elbow. But now you hold it there for 1 hour.
Oh. Ouch. Now we have a problem.
What's happening in your body?
My shoulder starts to ache. My muscles would start to tremble. I'd probably get a cramp in my arm. It would be painful.
And what about your mind? What are you thinking about?
I can't focus on anything else. All I can think about is the pain in my arm and wondering when the hour will finally be over.
Exactly. The glass hasn't changed. It's still just 200 grams. But to you, it feels like it weighs 5 kilos,
Yep.
10 pounds.
The perceived weight has changed dramatically.
Okay, so what's stage 3?
Now, you hold it for an entire day, 24 hours.
That's impossible. I couldn't do it.
And if you tried, what would happen? Your arm would go completely numb. Eventually, you'd lose all muscle control. The pain would be excruciating.
I'd be paralyzed. We'd be paralyzed. You physically could not do anything else. You couldn't drive your car. You couldn't type an email. You couldn't hug a friend because 100% of your resources are tied up in just holding that glass.
And the glass still hasn't changed its actual weight.
That is the whole metaphor. The glass represents your stress, your worries. It's that rude comment someone made to you this morning. It's that looming deadline for next week.
So the problem itself, the absolute weight of it, isn't what breaks us, is how long we carry it. It's the duration of the holding.
This is such a critical distinction.
Yeah.
Because we so often judge ourselves for being weak. We think, why am I so tired from this? It's just a small problem. I should be able to handle this.
Right. It's just one email. Why am I freaking out about it so much?
Exactly. But if you've been holding that one email in your mind for 12 hours straight, replaying it over and over, it doesn't matter that it's a small email. The duration has turned it into a heavy, heavy weight.
I want to make this really concrete with a personal story because I think we've all done this. I am definitely guilty of it.
Please share it.
So a couple of years ago, I got a message from a colleague. It wasn't even a bad message, really. It just said, hey, we need to talk about the project structure on Monday.
Oh, the dreaded we need to talk. That's such a trigger phrase.
It is. And I got this message on a Friday evening around 7 p.m.
The worst possible timing. Just the worst.
The absolute worst. Now, logically, the weight of this problem was very light. It was just a future discussion. If I had gotten that message on Monday morning at 9 a.m., I would have walked over to their desk, had the chat, and it would have been done in 20 minutes.
Right. So in that Monday morning scenario, you hold the glass for 20 minutes, lightweight, no pain, problem solved.
Exactly. But because it was Friday night, I couldn't solve it. I couldn't put the glass down.
You were forced to hold it all weekend.
I was. I went out to dinner with my friends, but I wasn't really there. I was holding the glass. I was in my head wondering, did I do something wrong? Is the client angry? Is our budget getting cut?
You were ruminating.
Completely. I woke up on Saturday morning, and the first thought in my head was about that meeting. Still holding the glass. I went for a hike, which is supposed to be relaxing, right?
Supposed to be.
But my mind was just replaying these imaginary negative conversations. By Sunday night, I was exhausted. I felt irritable. I snapped at my partner over something tiny.
And then when Monday finally came.
The meeting took 10 minutes. It was a minor adjustment to a timeline. It was no big deal at all.
But you had already paid a massive price for it.
I was wiped out for the rest of the day. I had essentially spent 48 hours holding a 10-minute glass of water.
That is a perfect example of how duration creates the weight. My version of this is a little different. Yours was about the future. That anticipatory anxiety. Mine is usually about the past.
Oh, the replay theater, as I like to call it.
The replay theater, exactly. I remember I gave a presentation once.
Yeah.
And it went, okay. It wasn't amazing. It wasn't terrible. It was just fine.
A 200-gram presentation.
Precisely. But on the drive home, I started thinking about one specific slide where I stumbled over a word. Just a tiny, insignificant stumble.
And let me guess, you didn't just think about it one time.
Oh, no. I put that moment on a continuous loop. Why did I say that? I must look so stupid. Everyone in the room probably noticed and thought I was an idiot. I replayed that 3-second moment for 3 days.
You were holding a glass that was already empty. The water was gone. The event was over in the past.
Yes, and that's the real tragedy of it. The event didn't exist anymore. It was gone.
Mm-hmm.
But by holding on to the memory of it, my body was creating fresh, real physical stress over and over again.
That brings us perfectly to the science behind all of this, because you just said something so important, creating physical stress. I think our listeners need to understand this isn't just a nice metaphor. When we say holding the glass, we are talking about a literal biological process happening inside of us.
We absolutely are. We need to talk about something called the HPA axis.
Okay, let's keep it simple, but let's make it accurate. The HPA axis.
Right. It stands for the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis. Essentially, it's the command center for the stress response in your body. When your brain perceives a danger, let's say a tiger jumps out of the bushes, your brain hits a big red panic button.
And that's a good thing in that situation, right?
In that situation, yes, it's a lifesaver. Your adrenal glands flood your system with hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. Your heart beats faster, your muscles tense up, your vision sharpens. You are physically ready to either fight the tiger or run away.
This is like the stage 1 holding. It's useful, it's energy, it's focus.
Exactly. Cortisol is amazing for short bursts. It's designed to save your life. But here is the major catch. Our human brains haven't really updated their software in about 50,000 years.
We're running very ancient software in a very modern world.
That's the perfect way to put it. So to your brain, a scary email from your boss looks almost exactly the same as a tiger.
Wait, really? The brain can't tell the difference?
Chemically, not really. The amygdala, your brain's little danger detector, it fires in the same way. Now the problem is, you can run away from a real tiger. The stress cycle completes itself. You run, you survive, you rest. The cortisol levels go back down.
But you can't run away from an email.
You can't. So you just sit there, and because you keep thinking about it, because you keep holding the glass, your brain thinks the tiger is still standing right in front of you.
Yeah.
And so it keeps pumping out cortisol.
Okay. And what happens when that cortisol stays in our system for too long?
It essentially turns from a helpful medicine into a slow-acting poison. This is what researchers call allostatic load.
Allostatic load. That sounds heavy.
It is heavy. Think of homeostasis as your body's perfect, balanced state. Everything is calm, cool, and collected. Allostasis is the process of achieving stability through change like revving your car's engine to get up a steep hill.
So allostatic load is what happens when you just never take your foot off the gas pedal.
Exactly. Bruce McEwen, who was a true giant in this field of research, described it as the wear and tear on the body from being overstressed. If you just sit in your driveway and rev your engine at full throttle for 24 hours straight, you're going to blow a gasket.
So when I held that email worry all weekend, I was basically redlining my body's engine for 48 hours straight.
Yes, and the damage from that is very real. High allostatic load is directly linked to things like high blood pressures, a suppressed immune system.
Which is why we always get sick after a big, stressful project is finished.
That's a huge part of it. And it's even linked to structural changes in the brain.
Wait, you mean structural changes?
Yes. Chronic, long-term stress can actually shrink the hippocampus, which is the part of your brain responsible for memory and learning.
Wow. So holding the glass literally makes us, I don't want to say dumber, but less cognitively capable.
It absolutely reduces our cognitive capacity. It makes it harder to think clearly, harder to learn new things. And that creates a really vicious cycle, right? You're stressed, so you can't think clearly, which causes you to make mistakes, which then makes you even more stressed.
That perfectly explains the paralysis in stage 3 of the glass story. The arm goes numb. The brain, in a way, goes numb too.
It's biological burnout.
You mentioned something earlier about your presentation story, that replay theater. There's a specific psychological term for that as well, isn't there?
It's called rumination.
And I love the origin of this word. It comes from cows, doesn't it?
It does. Cows are what we call ruminants. They eat grass, swallow it, and then later they bring it back up into their mouths to chew on it again.
That is a little bit disgusting.
It's gross, but it's a perfect metaphor for what we do with our negative thoughts. Rumination is when you bring up a thought you've already processed and you just chew on it again and again.
But why do we do it? It feels awful. Why would our brains want to do something that clearly hurts us?
That is the million-dollar question. A researcher at Yale, Susan Nolan-Hoeksema, studied this for years, and she found that we ruminate because, on some level, we think we are problem-solving.
We think we're being productive by worrying.
Yes, we tell ourselves, I'm just analyzing the situation so I don't make the same mistake again. But there is a huge, huge difference between reflection and destructive rumination.
Okay, so how can we tell the difference between the two?
Reflection leads to an insight or an action. It's linear. Oh, I stumbled on that word in my presentation. Next time, I'll practice that specific slide twice. Done. You can put the glass down?
It has an endpoint.
It does. Rumination, on the other hand, leads nowhere. It's a circle. Why am I so stupid? I always mess up. What if they all hate me now? It just asks these big, unanswerable emotional questions.
So reflection is like a straight line to a solution, and rumination is like a hamster wheel.
A hamster wheel that is generating cortisol the entire time it spins.
There's one more concept I want to touch on before we get to the solutions, because I think it explains why it can feel so hard to just put the glass down. It's called the Zeigarnik effect.
Ah, yes. From Bluma Zeigarnik. This is a fascinating story from the 1920s.
Tell us about the cafe.
So Bluma Zeigarnik was a Russian psychologist, and one day she was sitting in a very busy cafe in Berlin. She noticed something really strange about the waiters. They had incredible memories.
Okay.
They could remember these long, complex orders for a table of 10 people, drinks, appetizers, main courses, without ever writing anything down.
That is very impressive.
It was. But here's the twist. As soon as the customer paid the bill and the transaction was complete, the waiter forgot the entire order almost instantly. If you asked them 5 minutes later, what did that person have? They couldn't tell you.
So their brain only held on to the information while the task was open, unfinished?
Exactly. And that is the Zeigarnik effect. Our brains are hardwired to hold on to unfinished tasks. It's like having open windows on a computer. If a task is finished, the brain closes the window to save energy. But if the task is unfinished, the brain keeps that window open and the fan's spinning, nagging you about it.
This makes so much sense. This is why if I leave an email half-written, it just bothers me all night.
Yes. Your brain is trying to be helpful. It's saying, don't forget this isn't done yet. But in reality, it's just draining your mental battery.
So essentially, our modern lives are just a series of hundreds of open loops, unanswered texts, unfinished projects, undefined worries.
And every single one of those open loops is adding a little bit more weight to the glass we're holding.
Okay, so we have the metaphor of the glass, we have the biology of cortisol and allostatic load, we have the psychology of rumination and the Zeigarnik effect. I think we understand the problem pretty clearly. The glass gets heavy because we hold it for too long.
It's a bit of a grim picture so far, isn't it?
It is. But now we need to turn to the solution. How do we actually put the glass down? And for this, we are going right back to Stephen Covey.
To the circle of influence.
I find this to be one of the most practical and powerful tools for mental health ever invented. Can you visualize it for us?
Of course. Imagine you draw a very large circle on a piece of paper. We're going to call this the circle of concern.
And what goes inside this big circle?
Everything you care about or worry about. The weather, the global economy, the political news, what your neighbor thinks of you, the traffic jam you're stuck in, the fact that you're getting older.
Okay, so all the stuff that tends to keep us up at night.
Right. Now, inside that big circle, I want you to draw a smaller circle. This is the circle of influence.
And what goes in there?
Only the things you have meaningful, direct control over. Things like your attitude, your words, your decisions, your habits, your immediate actions right now.
And here's the connection to our glass metaphor. When we spend our time and energy focusing on the circle of concern, on things we cannot change, we are just holding the glass.
Yes. If you are sitting in your car, furious about a traffic jam, you are holding the glass. Can you make the cars in front of you move? No. So you are expending all this energy, revving your engine for absolutely zero result.
But if we shift our focus to the circle of influence...
That is the act of putting the glass down. You're in traffic. You can't change it. But you can choose to listen to a podcast. You can do some deep breathing exercises. You can call a friend. That is taking action. That is exerting control over what you actually can control.
This connects so beautifully to that Viktor Frankl idea that Covey quotes so often in his work.
Between stimulus and response, there is a space.
Let's unpack that a little. It's so important.
Okay. The stimulus is the event. It's the email you get, the traffic jam, the waiter spilling soup on your shirt. That thing happens to you. You can't stop it.
And the response is what we do about it.
Right. And usually we just react. Stimulus leads directly to reaction. There's no thinking, just pure emotion. But Frankl says that between that event and your reaction, there is a tiny gap, a pause, a space. And in that space lies our freedom to choose.
We have the choice to decide how we're going to carry the glass, or if we're going to carry it at all.
Exactly. Putting the glass down isn't about fixing the entire external world. It's about making an internal decision to stop engaging with the worry when it's not productive.
I think this is the perfect moment to pause. I want to do a little exercise with all our Sunnies listening right now.
I love this idea.
So wherever you are, unless you're driving a car, in which case, please keep your eyes on the road. But if you can, just take a moment. Take a deep breath.
Just one conscious breath in and out.
And just ask yourself this question. What glass am I holding right now?
Is it a conversation you had yesterday? Is it a fear about something coming up next year?
Just identify it. Try to give it a name. I am holding the Project X glass. Or I am holding the argument with my mom glass.
And as you name it, just notice how your body feels. Are your shoulders tight? Is your jaw clenched? Is there a knot in your stomach?
You don't have to fix it or solve it in this exact second. Just noticing the weight. That is the first and most important step.
And please, be gentle with yourself. It's okay to feel it. You aren't failing because you're stressed. You're just human.
So once we notice we're holding it, how do we actually drop it? Because I'll be honest, I can tell myself, stop worrying, but my brain doesn't always listen.
The brain is very stubborn. You can't just command it to delete a thought. You often have to use a technique that researchers call psychological detachment.
And this comes from Sabine Sonnentag's research, right?
Yes, she studies work, stress, and recovery. And she discovered something she calls the recovery paradox.
And what is that?
The paradox is that when you are the most stressed and need recovery the most, you are the least likely to actually do it.
Oh, that is so true. When I'm incredibly stressed, I don't go for a refreshing walk. I just sit on the couch and doom scroll on my phone for an hour.
Exactly. And Sonnentag's research found that just resting isn't enough. You need true detachment. Sitting on the couch while worrying about work is not rest. It is just holding the glass in a more comfortable chair.
So what is true detachment then?
It means completely disengaging the parts of your brain that were being stressed. So if your work stress is cognitive, lots of thinking, planning, analyzing, you need to do something physical or creative that forces your brain to switch tracks.
So just watching TV might not work because it's too passive. My brain can still ruminate in the background while the show is on.
Precisely. Passive leisure often allows those open loops to just keep spinning in the background. You need active detachment.
Okay, so give us some examples. What does that look like?
It's something that demands your full attention. Playing a musical instrument, rock climbing, cooking a complex new recipe from scratch, or learning a new language.
Like listening to this deep dive.
Seriously, if you are concentrating on understanding a new English phrase, your brain physically cannot worry about your boss at the same time. The brain simply can't hold both of those glasses.
So the strategy is put down the heavy glass by intentionally picking up a different, more interesting object.
Yes, intentional distraction is a very powerful and valid mental health strategy.
I really like that two-step rule we talked about in our preparation for this. Step 1, ask yourself, can I solve this right now?
This is the critical logic check. If the answer is yes, if you can take one small step to solve it, then do it. Write the email. Make the to-do list for tomorrow. Action kills anxiety. Action is what closes that Zeigarnik loop.
But if the answer is no, I can't solve it because it's 10 p.m. and the office is closed, or I can't solve it because it's something that happened in the past,
Then you must detach. You have to consciously tell yourself, the shop is closed for the day. I like to imagine pulling down one of those big metal shutters on a storefront, and then you have to go do something truly immersive.
It takes practice, though, doesn't it?
It's a muscle. The first few times you try to put the glass down, you'll probably find yourself picking it right back up 10 seconds later.
Oh, look at that. I'm worrying again.
And that's fine. That's part of the process. You just gently notice it, you put it down again, and then again. Eventually, your brain starts to learn that it's safe to actually let go.
We have covered so much ground today. Let's do a quick recap for our Sunnies, because these concepts are truly life-changing if we can apply them.
Let's review the toolkit we've built.
We started with the central image, the glass of water.
Then the key lesson. The weight of your problem is not the issue. The duration you hold it is the issue. So don't judge the problem. Judge the holding time.
Then we looked at the biology. Chronic holding creates allostatic load. It literally wears out your body's engine by keeping that cortisol tiger in the room with you.
We also talked about rumination, chewing on old thoughts, and the Zeigarnik effect, all those open loops. These are the psychological mechanisms that make the glass feel like it's glued to our hands.
And finally, we looked at the solution, shifting your focus to your circle of influence. What can you actually control right now?
And then asking that magic question, can I solve this right now? If not, you practice active detachment. You do something else that demands your full focus.
You know, researching this episode genuinely changed my week.
Really? How so?
I caught myself holding a worry about this recording, actually. I was a bit anxious that we wouldn't get the tone just right.
A very valid concern for a host.
But I realized I can't record it yet. It's only Tuesday. We record on Thursday. So I literally visualized putting a glass with the word recording on it down on a table. And then I went and played with my dog.
And the world did not end.
It did not end. And I came into this recording today with much more energy because I actually rested.
That is the power of this idea. It's not just about feeling better. It's about being better. You are a better host, a better friend, a better parent, a better worker when you aren't paralyzed by the weight of a glass you don't need to be holding.
So here is our challenge to you, our Sunnies.
A small piece of homework for today.
Today, just find one moment, where you notice you are holding a glass. It could be a small annoyance, it could be a big worry.
And consciously decide to put it down for just 10 minutes. Tell yourself, I will give myself permission to worry about this later, but for the next 10 minutes, I am going to be free.
Just see how light your arm feels. You might be very surprised.
And remember, you have the power. The glass is not glued to your hand. You are the one holding it, which always means you are the one who has the power to let it go.
Thank you so much for hanging out with us today. We know your time is so valuable, and we're just so grateful you chose to spend it here, diving deep with us.
We really are. To all of our Sunnies out there, thank you for listening, for learning with us, and for being so curious about the world and about yourselves.
If this episode helped you at all, maybe think of a friend who looks a little tired lately, a friend who might be holding a glass for too long.
And share this with them. It might be just the reminder they need to give their arm a much-needed break.
Be kind to your mind, everyone.
And we'll see you next time.